Hello, everybody, and welcome into Senior Living Live. My name is Melissa. Thank you so much, as always, for being with us here today. We've got an awesome webinar today discussing the legal side of making that transition into senior living or assisted living. Jerold E. Rothkoff, you see him there, managing attorney at Rothkoff Law Group, will give all of you today guidance on financial planning, care coordination, and of course, legal advice to help ensure a really smooth transition into the next phase of your senior living journey. Of course, as with all of our webinars, but especially today, we really want you to take advantage of the Q&A option. You can find that at the bottom of your screen. You'll see the Q&A button. You could type that there, click on that, type your questions out there, and I will be happy to read those to Jerold at the end of his presentation today. And of course, as always, we want all of you to be a part of our conversation this afternoon. Jerold, it is fantastic to have you here today. We're so excited for this webinar. It is all yours. Take it away.
Thank you, Melissa. Thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. I guess depending where you are in the country, so either good morning or good afternoon. My name is Jerry Rothkoff. You can call me officially Jerold, but feel free to refer to me as Jerry's fine. I am the founder and managing attorney of an elder care law firm referred to as Rothkoff Law Group. We work in Pennsylvania, New Jersey, more specifically Eastern Pennsylvania and South and Central New Jersey. And our focus is simply to help the older adults, those living with disabilities, and those who love them, their care partners, get the best care possible in whatever setting is possible. And I thank Arbor Terraces for inviting me today to speak to you all. And as Melissa said, don't be shy. Feel free to put questions that you may have in the chat or the Q&A portion of Zoom, and I would be happy to address them. And so what I wanted to cover today is simply what to look for specifically when your loved one or yourself, be it a child, I mean, it could be a child in some cases, but could be a parent, could be a spouse, could be a sibling, is transitioning out of the home typically to some type of long-term care setting. And obviously with Arbor Terraces being an assisted living community, we will specifically refer to assisted living, but we can talk about nursing home setting, we talk about independent living, whatever you're interested in. Just a little brief information regarding Rothkoff Law Group. As I mentioned, we are located in both Eastern Pennsylvania, serving throughout the Philadelphia metro area, and South and Central New Jersey. And our focus is exclusively to work with older adults and those living with disabilities to address issues related to care. And specifically, we're rather unique in the services that we provide, in the sense that we provide traditional legal services for older adults and those living with disabilities, such as estate planning that can encompass trust planning, wills, powers of attorney, advanced directives. We deal with more traditional elder law issues such as guardianships and dealing with issues related to incapacity, as well as dealing with public benefit issues, be it veterans benefits, Medicaid, Medicare, uh, and as well as other issues related to older adults, such as protecting assets from long-term care expenses, insurance denials, etc. That's all part and parcel of what we do. However, the most important thing we do is healthcare advocacy. More specifically, we have 8 full-time geriatric social workers who work full-time in the office. That's the most important staff we possibly can have, because the focus is to get the best care and advocate for our clients. Many of our clients need care in the home or possibly out of the home. So our focus is to address issues related to future housing, as well as keep the client safe in their home. In addition to our 8 geriatric social workers who visit our clients in whatever setting that the client is in to get the best care possible and advocate for them. We also have 2 death doulas We have two occupational therapists who do home safety evaluations and right sizing, so to speak, for our clients to determine what's the best place to live or make any modifications possibly to their physical surroundings that would be necessary in order to keep them in the least restrictive environment and help them be more for accessibility in the home. And again, it's rather unique in the services offered. We were one of the first few firms to have geriatric social workers as part of our elder law practice. And we've had geriatric social workers in the office for it's been 18 years now. And we're always looking to add value. I know some of you are in different parts of the country other than Pennsylvania or New Jersey. So I'm not going to be able to answer any specific state information that you may have. I would refer you to a local elder law firm in your geographic area or state in which you or town in which you live. So, but I'll be happy to try to address as much general information because some of the issues specifically surrounding Medicaid eligibility, for example, for an assisted living community is very much state specific. Okay, so let's get started. And Melissa, if anyone has any, you don't have to wait to, if anyone has any questions, there is no need to wait to the end to throw out some questions to me. If you have a question midway through, I would be happy to address it. I'd probably save at least 10 minutes at the end, if not more, for some Q&A. But if there's any questions during the presentation, I would be happy to address them as well, okay?
Okay, that sounds great. And the only question we have you just addressed in terms of the state-specific advice. So continue on. We are looking forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, I'll come back to some state-specific advice. As I go, probably. All right. Okay. So let's start with this premise. Okay. Let's start, and feel free in the chat to throw out who you think who said this, and maybe even more importantly, in what setting. So here's a quote by a famous American. No longer will older Americans be denied the hearing miracle of modern medicine. No longer will illness crush and destroy the savings they have so carefully put away over a lifetime so that they might enjoy dignity in their later years. No longer will young families see their own incomes, their own hopes, eaten away simply because they are carrying out their deep moral obligations to their parents and to their uncles and their aunts. And no longer will this nation, meaning the United States of America, refuse the hand of justice to those who have given a lifetime of service and wisdom and labor to the progress of this progressive country. Any thoughts about what famous American said this quote? And for a bonus round, in what setting?
Was it FDR? That's what someone wants to know.
You're certainly moving in the right direction, and I think that is a fantastic guess and answer. However, it's 100% incorrect.
Ooh.
But you're moving in the right direction. FDR, I get it. You're thinking the New Deal, and this kind of sounds like a New Deal type of quote back, certainly after World War II, and you're moving in the right direction. Just a little more modern than that. Lyndon Baines Johnson said this. And in what context? So you were almost there. So it was Lyndon Baines Johnson in 1965. And in what setting did he say it? It was when Medicare and Medicaid when he signed the Medicare and Medicaid Act into law in 1965. Okay, so that is what's that, 60 years ago, right? Does that sound right? 60 years ago. Does that sound right? According to my not very good math?
Yes.
Okay. So let's, again, the question and this could be a rhetorical question, but the question I ask all of you, knowing that this was said 60 years ago, does LBJ's quote when Medicare and Medicaid law became into effect, that was a big deal. I mean, FDR was Social Security, which was a big deal. FDR signed the Social Security Act into effect in the 30s, but Johnson signed Medicare and Medicaid law into effect. So which really hasn't changed very much over 60 years, I would argue. So do you think what he stated in 1965, 60 years ago, still applies in year 2025, sitting here today? Anyone? It could be a rhetorical question. You don't have to answer that. I would argue, at least from my perspective, and I want you to understand my biasness coming into this. I am very biased when it comes to advocating for older adults. I'm a card-carrying advocate for older adults. So I am biased, okay? I am not a neutral party here. I am not Switzerland. I will tell you that. So I would, in my humble opinion, working with older adults for over 25 years now, I would argue that probably this really does not currently hold true, at least 100% true today. I mean, again, I'm not here to be political or get in any means of political conversation, but we're still having this same debate today, sitting here today over the government shutdown, aren't we? Because regardless of which side of the aisle you may sit on, or whether you sit right in the middle of the aisle, the fact of the matter is the government shutdown is over access to health care. That's why this government is shut down as we see. The federal government, of course, I'm talking about, is technically shut down as this webinar is occurring today, October 15, 2025. So, and we still haven't gotten it right. I would argue, we still haven't gotten it right. It was a good start in 1965, but we have a hell of a way to go 60 years later, I would argue. That, and we'll talk a little more about that, but we're still fighting, I would argue, over the same issues regarding access to healthcare. Is healthcare a right? Is it an entitlement? Is everyone entitled to healthcare? Should you have the have and have-nots when it comes to healthcare? Those are important policy questions that this country is still grappling with, I would argue. So Medicare and Medicaid have been huge, have been a significant value to many, many older adults to keep them out of poverty, access quality care. However, things have changed over 60 years, but the laws really have not changed very much. So we're going to come back to that. And if you have any further questions or on that, feel free to share. Melissa will be happy to share them with all the attendees. So that said, let's get into estate planning documents. So when we talk about estate planning documents, regardless of, I'm starting with this because these are the building blocks. Regardless of the type of setting that you or your loved one is in, regardless of the medical status of your loved one, whether they're living at home and the goal is to stay at home, whether they're in an independent living, assisted living, or nursing home, whether they're paying for care or not paying for care, whether they need care or do not need care, whether they're single, whether they're married, everyone needs these basic documents. And as you age, it becomes even more important to have these documents because it's important to sign these documents when you are competent. Of course, as you age, the chances of developing some type of cognitive impairment like Alzheimer's, related dementia increase as you become older. So everyone needs a will with or without tax planning, and the type of will you need is really dependent upon your specific situation. I'm not here to talk about, what type of will you should have, should not have. Meet with your own estate planning advisor, and they can advise you more specifically. However, A will is not really the most important document most people need. A will is important, don't get me wrong, but a will is important really based upon your specific situation. But a will is only effective when a certain event occurs, and that, of course, is called death. Prior to death, everyone who's over the age of 18, in other words, a legal adult, needs to have documents for living. And those documents for living, depending on your state, are generally referred to as a durable financial or durable healthcare power of attorney. In some states, they may be referred to as a healthcare proxy. And again, as to estate planning, each of the 50 states have their own laws. So I'm not here, so it may be different in your individual states, but regardless, each individual needs a durable financial and a durable healthcare power of attorney. In other words, you want to appoint a third party, specifically a decision-making surrogate, to assist you in making decisions, specifically if you become incapacitated at some point in time. When I say incapacitated, I'm not necessarily talking about from a physical incapacity. I'm talking from a mental incapacity, generally for some form of cognitive impairment. You want to sign documents when you are competent, and those documents would continue to be effective if at some point you are incapacitated, incapable of making financial and healthcare decisions, and you would appoint a third-party surrogate. That could be a spouse. It could certainly be a child. It could be a good friend. It could be a sibling. It could be a grandchild. It could be a niece or nephew. You want to appoint someone during your lifetime to make decisions if you become incapacitated. And of course, as the older you get, there's a greater chance of having some type of cognitive impairment in place. Also, you would want a living will and advance directive. Again, there's different terminology in each individual state, which unlike a healthcare power of attorney, is specifically designed for end-of-life situation. What care you want, what care you do not want. Sometimes the healthcare power of attorney and advance directive are combined into one document. Sometimes they're separate documents. Also, from a trust perspective, depending on the state that you live in, maybe a revocable living trust would be appropriate. Maybe some form of an irrevocable trust would be appropriate. And that you may need it, you may not need it. It really boils down to your state laws, some of which involve a state administration. It may boil down to your own individual assets, the real estate you own, or any individual assets, whether you're a single individual or spouse and spouse, and also whether or not you need an irrevocable trust. You may not need some type of trust whatsoever. But those are some of the basic documents you would need. In addition to the estate planning documents, there is something referred to as a POST. That is an acronym based upon your state law. That refers to a physician order for life-sustaining treatment, POLST, POST, physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. It may not be law in your jurisdiction, okay? It's law in Pennsylvania as well as New Jersey, but in your specific state, it may or may not be law. That is a physician's order where you would sit down with your individual physician and you would decide whether or not to sign a physician's order for life-sustaining treatment that both yourself and the physician would review and then sign. And that would be an order about what type of care you want and what type of care you do not want. Now, this has nothing to do with transitioning out of your home to an assisted living community necessarily, but it's documents that's kind of the building blocks. But not every state has these documents in place. So those are the basic documents that you would find in most states, or that you would need at least. So if you have any questions on that, I would be happy to address in the chat if there are any specific questions regarding those documents in place. And if there are, feel free to Melissa can shout it out. But otherwise, I'll move on to the importance of pre-planning. average cost of nursing home care today, depending on the state, is most likely in excess of $150,000. For example, I work in the Philadelphia metropolitan area, either in Pennsylvania or southern New Jersey. The average cost is over $15,000 a month, $180,000. There are less expensive states where maybe it's closer to 10,000. There are more expensive states like California or New York where it might be closer to $20,000. Care is very expensive. Now, when we talk about assisted living, depending on the location of the, we'll just use Arbor Terrace, obviously, it could be over $100,000 private pay. Now, the main difference between nursing home and assisted living, other than the cost, I mean, assisted living, it might be $8,000 to $10,000 a month, but there's also different types of assisted living. There's also what's known as memory care assisted living. So memory care assisted living could be in excess of $10,000 a month, closer to $12,000. Again, it really depends upon the location of the community. There are states that the care is less expensive. There are states, like I said, like New Jersey, California, like Pennsylvania, where the costs could exceed these numbers. But the main difference, and this is important when you look at for services for your loved one, the main difference between when you talk about reimbursement is how the care is reimbursed. Other than the higher level of care in a nursing home setting, in addition to out-of-pocket costs where you pay privately, Medicare can cover a portion of the bill, but it's limited to not exceeding 100 days total. So someone who's over 65 or blind or disabled prior to age 65 generally has Medicare coverage that can cover a short-term rehabilitation stay in a nursing home, for example. And then if they're eligible for state Medicaid benefits, they can receive Medicaid coverage, typically after Medicare Medicare days end, or they qualify financially. I'm not going to spend very much time talking about Medicaid because that's very state specific, and what happens in Pennsylvania and New Jersey may not be what the laws are in Texas. So it's very state specific. I would refer you to your individual experts in those the state in which you or your loved one resides in. But one of the main differences is in a assisted living setting, unlike a nursing home setting, there is no health insurance coverage that will cover assisted living costs. Why? Because it's what is considered custodial care, meaning that it's not skilled care. So that means no Medicare coverage. There may be, if someone is fortunate enough to have long-term care insurance, that could cover the home care, or that could cover assisted living care, cover nursing home care. But your health insurance, mainly for our older adult clients, their Medicare coverage or their supplemental coverage will not cover assisted living costs. Also, Medicaid is not as prevalent in a nursing home setting, in an assisted living setting, excuse me, as it is in a nursing home setting. Some states, there is no Medicaid coverage whatsoever for assisted living. For example, in Pennsylvania, there generally is no coverage under Medicaid for assisted living. New Jersey, there is, but even that is limited. Most communities have a minimum number of beds for Medicaid, and you have to pay a minimum number of months before you are potentially eligible, even if you have no assets in your name. So assisted living, generally speaking, and again, you have to look at your state, individual state, tends to be private pay. Also, when we talk about the importance of pre-planning, avoid the need for a guardianship. I talked about your documents, that if your loved one is not capable of signing documents, you may need to go to a court in your jurisdiction and apply for what is known as guardianship. In some cases, specifically California, it may be referred to as a conservatorship, but you would need to go to the county court and ask for you or your loved one or someone else to be appointed a guardian for your loved one. So by having these necessary documents in place, you can access funds and avoid a potential guardianship, which is expensive and time consuming. Also, you want to investigate your housing options when it's a non-crisis situation. So, for example, if your loved one is already diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and the Alzheimer's unfortunately is progressing, the goal is to stay at home. But at the same time, you want to investigate what options are available for housing in your community. Maybe you're a child and you live across the country and you want to look at an Arbor community in your area. Well, you probably want to visit that Arbor community, find out what the cost structure is going to look like. What's the process? What do they need? How about if they live across the country, they have to assess your loved one? How are they going to do that? Is it going to be a virtual assessment? Are they going to need medical records? So investigate the housing and care options. If assets are relatively limited, what's their Medicaid policy? What happens if you run out of money? Will you have to find another community for your loved one to live? If your loved one has long-term care insurance, well, will the long-term care policy cover assisted living care? That's all part of your due diligence and investigation. Also, you want to protect the healthy spouse. So if there is a healthy spouse who's still going to live in the primary residence, well, does the residence need to be sold and the funds used to pay for care for that other spouse? What is the goal? If the goal is to stay at home, how do we protect that spouse to give that spouse additional assets and income? Do they want to move in together? So in other words, Arbor Terrace is an excellent community. We have two Arbor Terrace communities within 15 or 20 minutes of one of our offices in southern New Jersey, outside of Cherry Hill, New Jersey. But is that appropriate for both spouses? Maybe not. So where's the other spouse going to go if they want to remain together? That's all part of your due diligence and your proper investigation. I'm just going to look at the chat.
So let's start at the top with Catherine's question. My stepfather is being admitted this week to Arbor Terrace from the hospital. He has advanced Alzheimer's. My mom does not have power of attorney. They have been married 8 years. Does probate need to be involved for her to get power of attorney?
Maybe, maybe not.
Okay.
It's you said she has advanced Alzheimer's. So
Mhm.
my definition of advanced Alzheimer's would mean that your mom doesn't have the capacity to sign any new legal documents. I may be off on that, but you use the term advanced Alzheimer's disease, and she does not have a power of attorney. So just because they are spouse and spouse does not mean they have access to each other's finances if the assets are kept separately. For example, maybe your mother. I'm sorry, you said it's your father. So maybe your father has a retirement account like an IRA, for example. Well, just because they've been married does not mean that I'm sorry, your mother can access your stepdad's funds. Someone may need, if your dad doesn't have the capacity to sign a financial power of attorney, you or your mother or someone on your stepdad's behalf may need to file for a guardianship action with wherever they live in their local county. So that's obviously beyond the scope of advising you individually based upon where you live. But the only thing I can tell you, Catherine, is thank you for your question. And I'm sorry that your mom and stepdad are going through these issues. But I would suggest if that in order if your mom needs to access your stepdad's funds to pay for ongoing quality care for him, I would suggest that you consult with a local elder law attorney in your jurisdiction.
And just as a follow-up for Catherine, because this is something I would want to know if I was in the same situation, about how long does something like that take? If you're talking about getting
Um,
guardianship and then getting funds released, how long does that process usually take?
yeah, you have to look at what the process is in your jurisdiction, so I can't comment specifically.
Okay.
I can only comment based upon Pennsylvania and New Jersey. Anywhere between 3 to 6 months
Okay.
in the Philadelphia metro area.
Okay.
But
That's good.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
about the best I can do.
Okay. Nope.
Uh,
That gives Catherine a good timeline for her and her mother to work with. So
all right.
it's excellent. And she says, thank you very much. She says he has a great LTC policy.
Great. Fantastic. But even that, you have to, someone has to sign off on it. So even, and gain access to it. So even that could be an issue. But I'm
Right.
glad he has LTC means long-term care policy,
Yes.
which
Yeah.
long-term care insurance policy, I assume.
Which is
All right.
fantastic.
Yes,
And
absolutely. So
yes.
let's talk about long-term care financing then. Um, I touched upon it earlier, but when you talk about long-term care financing, there is a distinction between the different benefits. Private pay, that's relatively straightforward. Long-term care insurance, what Catherine just mentioned, most of my clients do not have long-term care insurance. But if you have it, it's important to be able to keep the policy in play. It's great, but it's a luxury, and some people who pay for it over the years find it getting too expensive, and I get that, but it can be very helpful. Medicare, I talked about Medicare and Medicaid already a little bit about found Medicare back to 1965 was never designed to cover long-term care expenses. Do not rely on Medicare to cover assisted living because it doesn't exist. Medicare covers acute care, hospitalization, doctor's visits. It covers up to 100 days of rehabilitation in a skilled nursing facility. It can cover short-term home care, but Medicare was never designed to cover long-term care needs. That's where Medicaid comes in. But of course, Medicaid is financially dependent based upon your assets. You have to be eligible for Medicaid. If you've paid into the system through payroll, or your spouse did, you're automatically entitled to Medicare at age 65 or blind or disabled prior to age 65. But not everyone is automatically entitled to Medicaid. And as I alluded to, there's a difference between Medicaid coverage for nursing home and Medicaid coverage for assisted living, which is not nearly as prevalent. Also, veterans benefits. Um, you are the issue with veterans benefits is that you have to be a veteran or the widowed spouse of a veteran. So obviously, a lot of people are already ruled out to receive benefits if you're not a veteran or widowed spouse of a veteran. Without going into a great detail, there are situations that you may be entitled, or your loved one or your surviving spouse going to assisted living or even paying for home care may be entitled to veterans benefits for a tax-free pension to receive those benefits. There's much more information, by the way, on our website. So again, a lot of this is much more detailed on our website. It's rothkofflaw.com, and I think Melissa will share these. Someone asked the question. I think Melissa would be happy to share these slides with the attendees as well.
Okay, yeah. So that typically is determined by the guest if they want to share those slides. So and you did answer that question. So we are thankful and grateful that you are allowing that to be shared with our audience. And just as a reminder to everybody here, in case this is your first time, you used an email to RSVP for today's webinar, and we will send this webinar in full tomorrow to that email. So you can send it to friends, family, and can rewatch it at your leisure. So great question there. And Melissa, again, thank you for being a part of the conversation today. We appreciate the interaction. So let's get to another question here, Jerry, from Mary. If you have a healthcare power of attorney, do you still need a POLST, a physician's
Um,
order for life sustaining treatment?
Mary, think of the healthcare proxy or healthcare power of attorney as an umbrella. It's an umbrella policy. Think of it. So it covers everything related to healthcare decision making. Okay. However, a POLST is different. meaning that the healthcare power of attorney can cover non-end of life circumstances. The pulse comes in at end of life. And that's not something that is binding because it's a physician's order. It's physician's order for life-sustaining treatment. So it's different than your other documents, which are voluntary. The pulse is a physician's order that goes into your medical chart, your electronic medical chart. So it's voluntary, certainly, but it's about end of life. So if you're ever in a circumstance that that unfortunately is an end of life circumstance, it would be on your chart and like a physician's order, like a do not resuscitate order that the physicians and your family would have to honor. So it's different than a healthcare power of attorney, because a healthcare power of attorney can simply be an exception to HIPAA rules, for example, saying, okay, you can give my spouse healthcare information in a non-crisis circumstance or access a medical record, as opposed to the pulse, which is an end of life physician's order. Okay.
Okay. Okay. Mary, I hope that that answers your question. And these are obviously very good questions. And again, as we start to get to the back half of the hour, this is a really good time to type your questions out in the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen to get in on the conversation here with Jerry today. Again, he's giving out great advice. Please take advantage. Alice has a question, and this may be directed specifically for you. I had a difficult time finding an elder care attorney. How do you find one? I am a legal guardian for my aunt who is at Arbor Terrace, Mount Laurel, which is in New Jersey.
Well, I mean, you're speaking to the choir here, Alice. So, you know what I'm trying to say? So, I mean, I mean, you can certainly Google elder law, Mount Laurel, elder law, South Jersey. They're National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. You know, I mean, there are some good ones in your area. I'll just leave it at that.
Okay.
You're welcome to contact our office. If we can't help you, we'll find someone who can. So we work up and down from Central Jersey down to the Jersey Shore and everywhere in between. So there are some good ones out there. You just need to find them, and not every elder law firm provides the same services. But you know, you're certainly in our neck of the woods. So any questions, feel free to reach out to us. If we can't help you, we'll find someone who can.
Good, very good. And will you have a slide towards the end of the presentation that has your contact information?
I believe it does, yes.
Okay, very good, very good.
Okay.
All right, we got
All right.
another question here. Well, are you still good taking questions now, or do you want to continue?
Take one more and then I'll move on because I don't want to
That
run
sounds
out of
good.
time either.
Okay. One from Melissa back on the POLST, the post. So are you saying that if a loved one sat with his physician and said, these are my life-ending wishes, and that post would be put in the loved one's Medicare record? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay.
It's a medical chart, not Medicare record, but I know what you're saying. Yes, that's what I'm saying.
Okay, perfect.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question. Jerry, continue.
All right, so let's talk about moving to assisted living. Some of you may already have a loved one in assisted living, whether it's an Arbor community or otherwise. But first of all, there is distinction between regular assisted living and memory care. And not every assisted living is the same. A lot of people don't understand the distinction between assisted living and nursing home, and they use those the terminology, they interchange assisted living when they really mean nursing home and vice versa. And there's also one size. There are different shapes and sizes, specifically in assisted living as well. Meaning there are regular assisted living, and then there's typically an assisted living memory care. Some communities, like Arbor, have assisted living and memory care in different parts of the same building, and they're distinct parts of the building. And there are communities that just offer memory care. Again, I'm not an expert. I'll let Melissa address it. We have clients in Arbor communities. I don't provide counsel to Arbor. I'm totally separate and apart from Arbor. So I can't speak exactly what their communities are like throughout the country. I can only speak what they are in the southern New Jersey. And so you have to understand, sometimes memory care, your loved one may go right to memory care, or sometimes they will transition to memory care after in the standard assisted living for a period of time. So, but you want to explore the different options and what's the right fit. There's no right or wrong. You have to understand there are different options available. And also, it's important if finances are relatively limited, it's important to ask what their if your state does reimburse for assisted living care, you would want to ask, what is your facility's Medicaid policy, and is it in writing? Also, I mentioned it earlier. What happens if the money runs out? What will they kick my loved one out of the community, or or can we stay here and maybe there's some type of benevolent fund in some circumstances? So what happens if we don't if we're here, my loved one pays 10,000 plus a month and funds are depleted and runs out, there's no more money to pay, what happens then? If many of our clients have pets, and sometimes they will not leave their home if they can't take their pet with them. So if that, and I understand it, I mean, I've had dogs for many, many years. And what is their pet policy? Whether it's a cat, dog, rabbit, whatever it is, will my loved one be allowed to live with their pet? And if so, what's the pet policy? That's an important question for many of our clients. How about an adjustment period? Well, where it's meaning the adjustment for two individuals, or maybe even more than two. The adjustment for the individual who is moving to the assisted living community, and the adjustment for a spouse or a child who feels guilty placing their loved one into an assisted living community or other long-term care setting. And what's that adjustment period like? So that's something to consider. Is it healthy to visit the day after or the week after your loved one transitions to an assisted living community? You'll get some great advice by the professionals who work in the assisted living community, but something to consider. Also, what if a higher level of care is needed? What if you're in memory care, but you need a higher level of care? Who decides on whether your loved one needs a higher level of care? Can you bring in your own aide, like a one-on-one or a few hours a day to supplement the care that's provided by the assisted living community? All of those questions should be asked. When we talk about other issues, one of the things, regardless of the community, it's like buying real estate. It's location, location, location. You want to be able to find a community that you can reasonably visit on a regular basis, one that's close to a home. Or if you're an out-of-state caregiver, find someone locally, like a geriatric care manager, who can check in on your loved one on a regular basis, or of course a family member, friend, etc. Visit on a regular basis. You want to research before the crisis occurs. You certainly want if you're a resident, what are the resident rights? I mean, for example, we saw what happened during COVID. So what happened? I mean, there's nothing wrong with asking these questions. What happens if there's a pandemic like COVID? What's your policy? What's your policy for if there's COVID in the building now? Which COVID never went away, by the way. It's still there. Okay? And so COVID's still out there. And some communities shut down at least temporarily, even today, because of a COVID outbreak. So any type of pandemic, COVID, there will be something in the future, because history will always repeats itself. And I heard Dr. Anthony Fauci speak in Philadelphia about 3 weeks ago. And he guarantees there'll be another pandemic within the next decade over something. You want to make unscheduled visits. And when we talk, and I know that this is talking mainly about assisted living, but look, you want to also look when we talk about there's some changes in nursing home standing, but you want to look at their staffing. And here's what you shouldn't go by exclusively, although it's something to consider. There's all different types of reviews, from Yelp to Google to different senior care websites that rate different communities. That's something to consider, but I wouldn't take it as gospel, because there's a lot unsaid. And it's important to simply communicate there at the community with other family members of loved ones, and ask them about what they see. So with that, I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you have. If you're local in the South Jersey area or the Philadelphia metro area, there's our website. We have a whole host of events, or a lot of information that you can follow up on our website. And you ask for my information, and there's our elder law firm information. Okay, there's at rothkofflaw.com.
Perfect. And we'll just keep that up here in the final minutes of the webinar. Again, a really good time, 10 minutes remaining to get your questions into Jerry regarding his advice and digging deep into his knowledge about how to help you or a loved one make that transition into assisted living. Jerry, lots of really good information here today, but I'm curious, what do you find people come to you the most about that you kind of wish everybody knew, the education was a little bit better on?
What I just talked about.
Okay.
Me, you know, we, we're there to help individuals and families navigate the healthcare system.
Mhm.
And people do not understand, the average person, I should say, because they have no reason to deal with it previously, do not truly understand how convoluted the healthcare system is, especially when you're dealing if you're a caregiver for an older adult who needs care. What's the difference between Medicare and Medicaid? My late husband was a veteran. What VA benefits are available? What's the difference between regular memory care and assisted living? Well, why doesn't Medicaid cover assisted living, but it covers nursing home care? Why doesn't Medicare cover home care on an ongoing basis, or assisted living? Isn't that what I paid into the system for? My long-term care insurance covers nursing home, but why doesn't it cover home care? I never knew that. I just assumed it would. But until I looked at the policy, but now I look at the policy, I'm told there's no coverage for home care, only nursing home care. So, and some of this is based upon state law as well. So it's important to plan ahead, especially if you have a loved one diagnosed with some type of syndrome where care is going to be needed. Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, an individual's a stroke survivor and has certain deficits after surviving the stroke. Those are all important issues to deal with. Those are care issues, which we address. And then, of course, you have the financial and legal planning issues, making sure you have updated financial healthcare powers of attorney. You have an updated will based upon your specific situation. And based upon your individual situation, is it a second marriage for you? Do you have stepchildren? That changes the equation just a tad. You may have a child who has a special need, and that maybe you need to engage in some special needs planning to protect your child living with a disability. I'm talking about an adult disabled child. I'm not talking a minor child. Maybe that you may want to stay at home, but is your house conducive for you to remaining at home? Maybe you live in a split level with lots of steps. Maybe you have significant neuropathy and unable to navigate the steps very well. And so, you know, and if you are a caregiver child, well, you got to start planning ahead of time. You can't say, Mom, okay, we're going to Arbor today. I'm going to drop you off there, and this is going to be your new home. That will not play out very well, generally speaking. So you need to help facilitate all of these issues. So in a perfect world, to make a long story quite long, all of this will be addressed in advance. But we don't live in that perfect world. We live in the world of human nature. And human nature says we will procrastinate because we do not want to think of bad stuff. We're gonna spend hours on Google and TripAdvisor planning our next vacation, but we'll not even consider reviewing options to care for Mom for the rest of her life.
Yeah. Yep, and many of us have experienced that, are experiencing that firsthand, and it is very difficult. And the last thing, and we preach this all the time on our webinars, is don't wait until it's an emergency. Everything becomes 2, 3, 4 times harder than it really needs to be at that time. I have a question for you, Jerry, and this goes back to Medicare. You did touch on that. Should people stay with the traditional Medicare, or should they move forward within those Medicare Advantage plans that you see all over the television and commercials?
It's a very difficult, good, excellent question. Very difficult question to answer because it's very fact specific based upon your individual circumstances.
Mhm.
Um, I would suggest if you look, now we're in the annual enrollment period, which started today, and goes, I believe, through December 7th, the annual Medicare enrollment period, that is. I would suggest that you meet with someone in your local area who is very knowledgeable on Medicare coverage, and then review your options, what your prescription drug coverage is, what your individual situation is. Do you have traditional Medicare now? Do you have what's called a Medicare HMO, which is a Medicare Advantage plan that you were referring to, sometimes referred to as Medicare Part C? You would want to review those options, and determine what's best for you. If you have a traditional Medicare plan, meaning Part A and B, and then you have a Medigap plan, maybe that's going to be good enough. However, what I will warn you, though, is that if you have traditional Medicare with a Medigap plan, which covers copays, things of that nature, which is an extra premium, and then you switch over to a Medicare Advantage plan because you like the benefits that it offers, you may not, and you decide that Medicare Advantage plan, which is a Medicare HMO, is not appropriate for you any longer, and you want to go back to traditional Medicare, you may not be able to pick up another Medigap plan because a Medigap plan, most people do not know, can discriminate against you because of a pre-existing condition. So if you're diagnosed with mild cognitive impairment, MCI as it's referred to, or you've been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease, even though you don't have any, you're totally independent, you can be denied a Medigap policy because of the pre-existing condition. So you want to think long and hard about switching. Also, Medigap coverage is not for everyone. History shows that the Medigap, if you have Medigap coverage, you're more likely to be denied coverage for certain conditions, certain procedures. And one of the reasons, without going into detail, because I think we're past the hour at this, we're about to head up to the 60-minute mark at this point. One of the issues with a Medigap policy is that you're going to see more and more usage of AI to deny claims. So, and you're starting to see that more and more. Artificial intelligence is being used to review claims and deny claims, specifically by Medicare Advantage plans. So again, I guess you see my bias already without me coming out and say it, but be very cautious of Medicare Advantage plans. There's a lot of advertising, especially this time of year going on. You'll see on TV and radio, but it's not all it's made up to be. All the benefits. It's not. It's advertising. Just keep that in mind.
Yeah, and I'm glad you pointed some of that out. And I did not know about the AI, but that um I could shake my head, but then I'm kind of like, oh, well, that sounds about right with everything else in terms of healthcare and the way that we sort of go about it in the United States. I think we had a comment there, and Melissa says that Clark Howard says to stay with traditional Medicare for some of the reasons that I guess you mentioned there, Jerry. One more question from me, and then and I know that we could probably talk forever about all these topics, but long-term care insurance, right? Sounds great. You could pick it up when, you're around my age or what have you. And as you continue to pay, it gets more expensive to the point where you're wondering if it's even worth the continuation of the payment for the premium. Can you talk about long-term care? And for those who are questioning it now, and can get in on it now, is it worth it?
It is worth it if you have long-term care insurance policy and you can afford the premiums, which may have risen. I don't recommend changing the um, keeping it. However, it's very expensive,
Yep.
and most of my clients do not have long-term care insurance. If you're able to purchase it, purchase it. Again, it's very specific. I mean, you have to look at what your individual situation is. Some individuals are fortunate enough to self-insure. They have enough assets, they don't need to insure against the risk of long-term care. For example, if your spouse, and we work with a lot of school teachers, a lot of retired school teachers, and that school teachers generally have a state pension. And if your spouse, you may have over $12,000 in fixed income between your Social Security and pension. So maybe you need less insurance because you're guaranteed 120 or 150,000 in annual fixed income between spouses. So you have to look at what your individual situation is. There's not one hard and fast rule. But if you can insure against the risk, it's generally makes sense to do so, but it can be very expensive.
Okay. All right. Jerry, I think we are coming up to the top of the hour. Let me just make sure we don't have any additional questions here. And we do not, we do thank all of you, of course, for chiming in here today to get your questions answered by Jerry, who obviously did a fantastic job with all of the questions. And Jerry, we just thank you for taking the time to share your knowledge and answer all of our viewers' questions. As I said, great webinar, extremely informative. And I feel like we've just literally touched the tip of the iceberg of all of these topics here today. But again, very well done. Please, please, please come back.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Melissa and Arbiters, for inviting me. I hope you found it worthwhile and the attendees found it worthwhile. Any follow-up questions, please, you have our info. You're welcome to contact us, and we'll make sure everyone gets a copy of these slides that Melissa can send out.
Yeah, fantastic. Well, thank you again for being with us. And for those of you watching, if you enjoyed this webinar with Jerry and you found it informative, which I'm sure you did because I know I did, please head on over to our website. It's www.seniorlivinglive.com. We've got webinars all about senior living, just like this one. And the best part, all of our content is free and it is on demand at your convenience. Thank you so much, everybody, for being with us. Have a great day.
Bye-bye, everyone.